But he knows the Latin American formula. With his Latin American spirit, he keeps himself happier and younger. And he subscribes to this Latin American philosophy that we don't stop having fun when we are old. We become old only when you stop having fun. So he keeps fun with Latin America. And he is one of the pioneers of taking interest in Latin America. Probably the first journalist and the first one to have come out with a newsletter on Indo-Latin American relations. And that he has revived his interest and is coming back. The admirers of the Latin America of the 60s are uncritical and ideological. Not only Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, they wouldn't even like criticism of Chavez or Maduro. Now, in the case of Latin America, they go even deeper. The Latin American scholars of India, they are stuck in the India of Sanskrit and Upanishads. So in the past, the faces of Indians and Latin Americans were past-oriented and ideological in promoting relations. In contrast, now comes new, refreshing, young faces. For example, there is this young boy called Hari Seshashayi. He was a journalist. He went on ISEC scholarship to Peru, fell in love with Latin America, came back, joined Gateway House, and is working. Now he's finished his master's in Latin America studies from Stanford, and he wants to bet his career on Latin America. There's a girl called Nivedita Kashyap from Bengaluru. She's an IT girl. She went again to Peru to work with an IT company, and she fell in love with Latin America. Now she has finished her master's in Johns Hopkins University on Latin America studies, and she wants to do PhD. On the other side, you have people like Oliver Stinkel from Brazil. He talks about India in a way no Western scholar or Indian scholar interprets India. And you have people like Jorge Hein from Chile and Soraya Caro from Colombia. They take interest in the contemporary India, and they are future-oriented, and they are pragmatic, positive, optimistic. This is the scholarly side. On the business, I always tell the Indian businessman that the risk of doing business with Latin America is falling in love. And quite a few have taken the risk and fallen in love. There are these 3 Indian boys from Agra, Delhi, and Coimbatore who went to Colombia for an IT project. Promptly they fell in love with 3 Colombian girls and left their company. They formed their own company called Sophos Solution, which is doing extremely well. A friend of mine from Chennai, he has a mid-level pharmaceutical company called Coupling Point. He sent his son to Guatemala, and he promptly fell in love with a Guatemalteca. And he settled there for good. And he's doing something about $40 million of business in Guatemala and in Latin America. They have about 30 people over there. 95% of the exports of this company goes to Latin America. And it's not just the boys thing, the girls also do. There's a girl from Delhi called Reshmi Quatra, used to work with the Dauber and Ranbaxy and now Jubilant. Reshmi Quatra went on export promotion trip to Costa Rica, and she came back as Reshmi Murillo, one of the richest pharmaceutical businessmen from Costa Rica. From Brazil, there was a girl called Cecilia Angelon. She went to London looking for a job. And she got a job as a sales girl in a shop run by an Indian called Malhotra. And soon, Cecilia Angelon became Cecilia Malhotra. She took him to Sao Paulo. And she wanted to do some business with India. She started importing henna powder from India. The business picked up, she started exporting to other countries of Latin America. Being smart, she thought, why import the finished products? Let me import the ingredients. She made her own brand called Surya Henna, exporting from United States to Chile, built up a business of $20 million. And guess what? She's exporting to India now. And she wants to set up a plant in India to manufacture for exports to Southeast Asia. Now, these are the new faces in India-Latin America relations. Besides these faces of Indians and Latin American, there are two other outsider faces which have started influencing these relations. One is the Americans and the other one is Chinese. In January this year, there was a blog in America's Quarterly saying, is this not the time for India to be in Latin America? America's Quarterly. There have been a series of articles and blogs in American think tanks, media, including Miami Herald, advocating, cheerleading greater presence of India in Latin America. Obvious. The US General in a congressional investigation, a hearing, he talked about the Chinese pivot to the Americas, like the American pivot to Asia. So to counter that, to a limited extent, the Americans have been encouraging greater Indian presence in Latin America. Johns Hopkins University is coming out with a book early next year. It's called Latin America's Relations with China and India. Now, China, in the last China CELAC summit, the Chinese president said, in the next 10 years, the trade would be taken from $270 billion last year to $500 billion in the next 10 years. And he promised investment of $250 billion in the next year. Already they have done close to about $100 billion. China has given credit of $120 billion. What they gave in 2014 was more than the combined credit given by World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and US Exim Bank. But it is a win-win partnership between Latin America and China. But Latin America is quiet. They had some experience and they don't want to be over-dependent on China. I'll give you an example. Argentina is the largest exporter of soya oil in the world. China is the largest importer of soya oil in the world. In 2008, the Chinese got annoyed with the Argentines' restriction on import of Chinese goods. So they said, no, there's something wrong with your soya oil, technical specification. They drastically reduced the import from $2 billion to just about $200 million. They finished the market. Now today, India is the largest importer of Argentine soya oil. The Brazilian company Vale built this huge Vale Max ships to carry over 400,000 tons of iron ore to China. Now the Chinese said, oh, there's some problem, these ships will cause environmental issues for our ports. They just banned the ships. And now they have just started allowing it because Costco has bought these Vale Max ships and they are leasing it out to Vale. So that is the risk of overdependence. When the Chinese companies in 2007-8 came to Latin America wanting to buy whole provinces in Rio Negro, in Argentina, in Bahia, in Brazil, the Latin American got rattled. And they started imposing restrictions on foreign acquisition of land. In Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, now it's only 5,000 hectares. In Buenos Aires, in the greater Buenos Aires, there are around 10,000 supermarkets, mini supermarket shops run by the Chinese. You can't buy anything without going to the Chinese shops there. And there is an interesting film called Cuente Chino by Ricardo Darín, famous Argentine actor. Now, because of these fears, Latin Americans want to diversify, reduce their over-dependence on China, and look at countries like India. Politically and economically, there is a new perception, there is a new mindset between Indians and Latin Americans. The Latin Americans look at the new India, and the Indians are looking at the new Latin America. This new Latin America is characterized politically by political stability and democratic maturity. In the olden days, Latin America was subjected to ideological polarization, civil wars. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed. But today, the dominant trend in Latin America is not extreme left, not extreme right, going towards the center. People call it as Lulaism or Brasilia consensus in contrast to the Washington consensus. It is a balanced mix of pro-poor and business-friendly policies. So this is the way Latin America is going to move. And Latin America is the region which has reduced poverty much more than any other region in the last decade. Over 60 million people have come out of poverty. And the conditional cash transfers is not just a leftist thing. It was practiced in Mexico. Vicente Fox. In fact, his advisor, Santiago Levy, advised Lula. In most countries of Latin America, you have conditional cash transfers which are operated more efficiently than in India. With this, more people are joining the middle class, having stake in democratic strength and stability. That is why India is betting on the new Latin America of political stability and democratic maturity. One of the symbols of this democratic maturity is what they did in Mexico, called Mexico Pact. When Peña Nieto, when he got elected, before he assumed power, he sat with the opposition and worked out a consensus, which is called Mexico Pact, under which they would do major reforms vital for the country, and they have delivered. Already, dozen reforms have been implemented in Mexico. Mexico is today the largest democracy in the world which has done so many major reforms in this short period. Economically, the Indians look at the new Latin America as more stable and growing. No longer the issues of hyperinflation and external debt and those kind of issues. Now, this is a clear example is Evo Morales. Western media write all kinds of nonsense about him, but he runs Bolivian economy much better than Obama or Angela Merkel. The macroeconomic fundamentals of Bolivia are much stronger than Germany or that of United States. and the economies have become resilient. For example, Argentina, they had gotten to a crisis of $90 billion of debt in 2001-2. But in 1 year, they bounced back. 2003 started growing. 2003 to 8, they grew over 5%. Without the help of IMF, without the help of United States or anybody else, on their own they did it. Now, this is the new Latin America. And the Latin Americans look at India as a great market, growing market for their products, crude oil, the agricultural products. Now, crude oil, the United States used to be the main consumer of crude oil from Mexico, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. But now, the United States is becoming self-sufficient. So they have to look for new markets. And India is the one. Last year, our imports from Latin America was over 15% of our total requirements. On the commercial side, I just want to mention one thing. The healthcare. Today, if the cost of healthcare for the Latin American consumers and the governments are much less than what it was for 20 years back, it's thanks to the Indian pharmaceutical companies who introduced generic medicines. And the Latin American political leaders, including José Serra from Brazil, they invited the Indian companies to put pressure on the multinationals and their own pharmaceutical companies to increase the proportion of generic medicines and to bring down the cost. So I tell people, no me preguntes más, déjanos imaginar que no existe el pasado, que nacimos al mismo instante en que nos conocimos. Don't ask me anymore. Let us imagine there is no past. Let's imagine that we were born when we got to know each other. So that should be the approach. Thank you.